Welcome to Get the Elephant Out of the Room. I'm Chris Webber. We all have to deal with difficult people at work, difficult managers, difficult colleagues and difficult customers. In this podcast, we share stories and experiences of people like you who face these challenges and share their secrets to success. Our mission is to help everyone overcome obstacles and to become more confident, better communicators. So sit back and relax while we unravel the mysteries of another difficult person. I'm talking to Paula Tully, and I'm really pleased to finally have a conversation with her. Feels like a long time since we've been trying to arrange a discussion, and it's very odd in that we seem to have shared a life at some point. We grew up in the same area and went to similar schools, the same school, but we've never actually met, and we followed the similar career path as well. So I'm very excited to welcome you to the podcast, Paula.
Oh, well, yeah, me too. And I also think we went to the same university. So I think we've literally been living parallel lives.
It's very strange, isn't it? But brilliant in many ways. So you went to Liverpool University?
I did, to do pharmacology.
Same degree.
I know. Wow. Quite bizarre.
It is very strange. And you think to yourself, and I love all the moments, I've got older children who are making these career choices in their lives, thinking that they're the only one making these choices, the only one struggling with these decisions. And clearly the choices I made are exactly the same as yours.
Exactly. And it's really nice to meet you. St. Helens, we both come from the same background and the same place. And here we are today. So lovely to be with you.
Yeah, I know. And do you know what? When I grew up there, I thought it was a small town. And this is the second of podcast episode I've done with someone who is from St. Helens. And again, it was another strange coincidence that it happened to be somebody I spoke to who then said, "Oh, I grew up in a place called St. Helens." And it was like, wow. So it must be much bigger, or certainly plays above its weight, I would say.
Exactly.
Paula, introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a bit about what you're doing today and what inspires and excites you about what you do.
No problem at all. So I now run a company called Essentia, and I've been running that company now. I'm going into my 8th year, which is madness when I think back. And prior to that, I spent most of my life in the corporate sector, leading teams across Europe, Canada, Australia. And decided that there was one more chapter in me to run my own business, which I started 8 years ago, and now I work with teams, organisations in the corporate space, and also within the NHS, which I really enjoy doing work within the NHS. The strapline for the business I run is leading with intention, and I'm really passionate about. We've got one life. And it's really important to make it a really good one. And whether we're leading at work, leading our teams, or leading ourselves, our kids, our families, let's just do it, in the best way possible. That's who I am.
Sounds wonderful, and so much that I'd love to dig into to understand a little bit more about what inspires you. And intention is a great word. What does it mean to you and to the clients that you work with? What are they struggling with?
Goodness. Yeah, I mean, I think at the moment, people are struggling with many things. I think intention for me comes from a place of within the business, we have a model, we call it the 6 C's. And, the first C is clarity. And I think intention is, really having clarity on where are we going and what do we want, whether that be work or life. And I think when we're clear, we can have some strong energy behind it, if that makes sense. And I think to answer your question in terms of what are people struggling with, I mean, many things, but I think sometimes during coaching, that clarity of who we are, the clarity of self, the clarity of what we really want, and the courage to follow through, for me, I think is often a topic that I'm sure you address on a daily basis, and I seem to address, and the team seems to address on on a very regular basis.
Absolutely. And I've wrestled with that myself. And, talking about my children and what they're wrestling with, it's exactly the same things. And I think that's probably the biggest frustration for many people when they're at work or when they're at home is I don't know where I'm going, living day by day. I don't have a clear direction, but then to try and sit down and think about what my direction is a big question to answer because it feels so final.
Yes. Yes, it does.
How would you address that with people who are afraid of the finality that it's, if I decide that I'm going to go in this direction, this is who I want to be. And you use the words courage because I guess there's a sense of I need courage to follow through on it. I've decided I want to be this particular person and now I need to bring it to life. I need to do it to do. But then it's the fear of not reaching that goal. How do you address that? How do you work with people?
Yeah, it's funny. It's when you were talking there, it brings me back to a really special moment with my son. He's coming up to 22 very soon, but I remember him. He was just before his GCSEs, and it was around that lockdown period that we were all having to live with. And I remember him coming to me and going, "Mum, you keep going on about purpose, and I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what my why is. I just don't know." I remember he was sort of like out in the sun on a sun lounger and I was sitting there. And I think that question he asked me is that, people come to coaching with on a regular basis. And my answer to him then and the conversations I get to with people day to day is, life is a dance, and we don't know where the dance is going to take us, but we've got to stand up and we've got to smile and we've got to be prepared to dance with life in a really joyous way. And I think the most important question I ask a lot is what gives you joy? What makes you smile? And it's such a simple question, but often, whether it be my son that day or whether it be in work, people don't always really know the answer to that question. People default rightfully to their kids and to their animals, and they do bring us joy, and they should bring us joy. Maybe they don't always bring us joy, but often they do. But really thinking about that question, I find sometimes people don't always have an immediate answer. And I think if we can dance in the direction of what always nourishes us, fills us, gives us happiness and joy, we're moving in the direction of a life that's going to feel full and feel joyous and feel fulfilling. And I think, I think happiness is progress. That's all that happiness is. And I think we have to dance with this continuous progress to a life that gives us joy.
Inspiring stuff and simple stuff, simple objective. What makes you happy? And I think it's such a powerful question. And I've definitely wrestled with it with many people over the years of what it is that makes them happy. And of course, lots of people answer with the cliches. My children, as you said, or it's my animals, because they feel that that's the thing that they should answer with.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to pick out what really makes people happy or what's deeper than that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about changes, like life changes in the moment, because I guess that's another moment where people are looking for this clarity, this guidance is, my children have got older. What do I do now? Or I took great joy from my role at work, great pride in the job that I do, and now I'm retiring, or my company is restructured and I have a different role. That becomes a point of real frustration for people. And I guess that's a moment that people come looking for clarity as well.
Yes, it does. And I mean, all of those, there's many transitions in life, isn't there? I mean, we have the transition of leaving school, we have the transition of leaving university, we have the transition of kids coming into our lives or getting married, and then we have that transition. Well, I think there's a transition when we lose our parents, if unfortunately that's happened to any of us on here today, and then there is that transition of whatever retirement means. I don't like that word anymore. I think it's just another chapter of a book. But But I think what I find is it's often we're not allowing that space and that time to just pause, to just be with the question.
Mhm.
Because we're driven in a world, particularly our kids, where there's always got to be an answer, there's always got to be a solution, there's always the next thing. And often in our coaching practice when we're working with clients, we like people to just sit with the question. And I just literally before this podcast had a coaching call with someone where I just asked them to go home for the Christmas and to sit with it and be happy with not knowing, and also sitting with emergence, that things do, eventually they come to fruition. And I think often in this mad world that we're in, we are not happy with that as an answer, because we're looking for the answer. Our kids say, well, what's the answer, Mum? What do I do? And people at work say to me, well, tell me what to do. And I think we've lost the capacity to be okay with not knowing.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what you try and encourage people is to be comfortable with not knowing.
Yes, yes. And sitting with it for a while and trusting. And I fundamentally, with every fibre in my body, believe if you allow yourself to sit and to be and to put that question out there and maybe share it with a few friends and share it with your partner and let the conversation flow, things emerge. And the question of what gives you joy, things emerge. You start to realize, oh my God, that gives me joy. I forgot. That gives me happiness. And all of a sudden, in a relatively short space of time, we start to feel and see things. And then the next part of that is experimentation. Give it a go, give it a try. What happened? What did you learn? Did you like? No? Well, okay, we didn't like that. What else are we going to experiment with? But I think we've lost the power for this emergent thinking a little bit in this fast-paced, crazy world where we're all looking for a solution and an answer.
I think we're driven, because I think what you're saying is really powerful. You think we're driven though towards cliches like financial security that start to direct people's attention. So, what gives me joy? Sewing and creating things. I love sewing and creating things, and I want to. That's what really gives me joy and happiness is having
Yes.
finished something that I've made myself. Okay, well maybe that's something that you should pursue, but it's not going to make me any money. So what's the point? I need to go in to do something that's making me money, and
Yeah.
you feel that's like a toxic barrier that people have to overcome.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, and I think it can be sometimes a real point of conflict, because we all need to pay our bills, our mortgages, all the things that keep us surviving in life. I think sometimes it comes a little bit to the different stages and transitions of our life. There are different stages of life where we are more free to make choices. And think about my life. For many years I was a single mum. There wasn't much choice. I had to get on with it. I had to earn money and provide. I think I always call life being a dance. It's the dance between sometimes the work just needs to be done. Okay. It just needs to be done. We just got to get up and we've got to get on with it. And we've got to make it as much fun as we possibly can. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other parts of our life where joy can enter, where the creativity can enter. So I always, within the work we talk about, you get life right, you're going to get work right. And really, we can't compartmentalize work and life. So sure, sometimes we have to, for a period of time, do a job that isn't optimal. But if we take a step back, there are other components of our life beyond those definitive hours. Are we filling them? Are we nourishing ourselves with the things that are going to give us the energy back for going into that job tomorrow and getting our head down and getting through it? So there are periods of life where we've just got to get on with it, all of us, and we've all done that, and we all must do it. It's grit. It's what we have to do. But the more we dance with that, that period will, it's like night follows day. That period will close, more light will enter, and then there will be another chapter. And that's why I think it is a dance. And I think, your original question was about this definitiveness. I don't think we can be definitive. We've just got to keep dancing.
Mm. Yeah, and certainly people I talk to look back through their lives and say that I didn't have a direction, evolved as I went through it. And I continued to follow passions, or I continued to follow connections and moments, and it led me to a point. I was out recently on a trekking trip, and the guide who took us was a qualified mountain leader, spent years teaching, but his day job is a long distance lorry driver.
Wow.
Completely different.
Yeah.
And he was saying that he wants to spend a bit more time actually being a lorry driver, because he felt like he was losing the balance in his life, and he was spending far too much time away from his home. But it didn't dampen his passion for the mountains and for the outdoors. But I thought there was someone as a great example of living on the surface what seems like an amazing dream life,
mm-hmm.
paying the bills with a job where he spends probably way too much time sitting in traffic.
Yes, that's a perfect example. And I think it's really interesting. I mean, I remember a time where I was in a certain role where it was really driving me to a part of me that really took energy away from me. The discipline of continuously looking at certain elements of the role, KPIs, metrics, guardianism of dollars. I mean, I can do it, and I can do it rather well, but it drains me. And it was really interesting at that time. That was the time I went off and did a master's, which some people would look at me and go, "You're mad. How have you got any ability to fit that into the crazy life you're running?" But for me, it was the thing that gave me the energy to do the stuff I was finding really hard. So to some people, they thought I was the crazy woman. But for me, the extra hours I was spending doing the masters was absolutely topping me up. So I could come into work every day and get on with that guardian discipline that, yeah, I can do, but doing it on the long haul, it's incredibly draining. And I think that's the dance that we all have to find.
And I want to go back to that, because I mean, the podcast is about those moments, those difficult people that we've dealt with, and difficult situations we've dealt with. And it sounds to me like there's a wonderful example of something that you've overcome, because managing KPIs and metrics is not something you enjoy. It was part of a job that you had to do.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm making a leap and thinking, well, that's responsible to somebody who felt those things were important.
Yes.
So tell us a bit about that. How did you get into that role? And then how did you cope with this realization that it's not something that, certainly a big part of it, it's not something that you were going to relish?
Yeah. So I think, and this will, I'm sure many people this will resonate with. I entered, similar to you actually. I entered my world as a salesperson. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and in those days, sales was your entry point. And then you progress your career, and I left the sales world. I went into marketing. And my natural personality, if anyone understands Myers-Briggs, I'm an energetic future thinker, and I'm all about people, right? That's who I am. And so marketing was my space. I was creative, quite innovative, liked to experiment. I loved teams. I loved, going around Europe and the world, finding the small markets, getting the great ideas, bringing them back to the big markets. That was my space. And so I did really well. And so what happens when you do really well? You get promoted. and what happens sometimes with promotion is we're moving further and further away from the nature of who we are, because as we step up in leadership, we move more to the financials, we move to P&L, we move to the bottom line, we move to metrics, we move to KPIs, really important attributes that we all need to understand as leaders and also running our businesses. But for me, that wasn't my nature. It became my choice of something I needed to become good at, to become very good in the role I was in. And that, for me, that's about adaptability. We all have to, as leaders, we all have to be good at everything. And sometimes people say to me, "Oh, well, Paulie, I'm going to lead on, I lead on my strengths." And I say, "Well, that's fantastic. You will lead on your strengths to a certain level, but as you rise, your strengths alone will not be good enough. You have to become adaptable to many things." And so for me, my adaptability was leaning in more to the ruthlessness of discipline, that rigor of KPI. So therefore, that was very much the stuff that took my energy. And I was fine with it. It was part of the job, but I needed to find the dance of balance, if that makes sense. And so for me, that's when the question began. Somebody asked me, I remember one day I was on a walk, and a lady, she turned around to me and she said, what gives you joy, Paula? And I didn't know the answer to the question. I immediately, it was my son, it was my family, but I didn't know selfishly what gave me joy. And so that was the change. So, I decided I still wanted to lean into development. I wanted to lean into curiosity and learning. I wanted to lean into more about people. So that's when I did the masters. So although I was doing this crazy, and it really was a crazy job, planes, trains, automobiles, lots of numbers, lots of KPIs, I had to still do that because that was about me becoming very good in the role I was in. But I was balancing that with the masters, which was a lot of hours, but it was giving me joy and energy. And I think for sometimes people, particularly young people, I find sometimes they want to have it all. They want the joy, but they don't want the grit. And I don't think life is like that. We have to do the grit. We have to do the things that maybe are harder for us. But do them and become masterful at them, but equally balance how you're going to get the energy to do them well.
I'm going to go back because one of the things you said in there, and I think it's testament to who you are and the success of who you've become over the years, is you said, I understood this role. I understood the KPIs and the measures and the things I needed to back and become comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I was fine with it.
Yeah.
And I think that acceptance is a big moment, because I think that is where lots of people struggle. I talk to clients, their frustrations are that they're not fine with it.
Yeah.
And what you seem to have accepted here and taken for granted is an empathy with the importance of these tasks.
Yes.
That the organization requires them, your boss requires them, your boss's boss requires them. And so, it is what it is.
Yes.
And I'm going to take my joy somewhere else. I'm going to go and look at my master's degree. I'm going to look at passions I have outside of the job, and that will keep me going. That's where I need to get my joy from. How quickly did you get that realization, or did you find yourself struggling, swimming against the tide during that moment?
Yeah. So what happened to me was, it was a pivotal year in my life was 2013. We all have those moments in our life where it all comes crashing in. And for me, I got promoted into a really cool role, looking after the business. At that time, it was just in the UK. And there was a lot of stuff going on in that role. There were some challenges that took me into places that I'd never really been in before. But at the same time, I was still a single mum, just starting a new relationship. I had a mum who had always been my supporter, because it was myself, my son, and my mum, who was dying. She was dying of a brain tumor, and I was struggling. I was to the world smiling and doing a great job, but inside I was struggling hard. And I talk about this masters, but it was a life-changing moment. I knew I had to do something, because as much as I worked for a fabulous company, and it really was, I loved my time at the particular company that I was at, but it wasn't giving me what I needed at that point to thrive. I was surviving. In fact, I was dying metaphorically at the time. Um, and so that was the journey of me seeking outside information to enable me how to thrive and survive. So at the time, I knew I needed to do something. I knew I needed to do something different. And that was my path. I can only see the journey as I've described it to you now through going through the journey, if that makes sense. That's always
Yeah.
retrospective, isn't it? At the time, I knew that if I didn't do something, if I didn't open my mind, if I didn't listen and go broader, I wasn't going to I wasn't going to continue to be successful. In fact, I was going to have a nervous breakdown. I mean, it was
Mm.
as straight as that. So I was lucky that I listened to myself. I paused. I had the option of buying a new car or going on this masters. I mean, it was that crazy. And so the car I kept for another 13 years and I paid the money to the masters. But I made a choice. It was almost like a moment in time, where you make these decisions. And I thought, I have to do this. And I never looked back. And I think sometimes it is that moment of pause, of just going within to say, okay, this is not optimal for me at the moment. What do I need? Now, I was lucky. I could hear myself. Sometimes others need to talk it out with someone. And often people, when they're getting into that space, they stop talking, they stop sharing. I was lucky. I followed my gut and I was right.
Mhm.
But that is what I did. And I can only see it retrospectively, to be fair to the question you're asking.
You made choices in the moment that I think are really inspiring. Just listening to the story there, that decision point. Do I buy a new car or do I
Yeah.
go and do a master's?
Yeah.
And there are so many people who would take the car.
Yes.
There are so many people who would sit here and say, I've deserved this. I work really hard. I'm having a tough time right now. It's the car that I want. We're in
Yes.
that world, that shallow
Yeah.
world where it's about how I look to the outside world. And I'm just going to reflect back. What I heard from you is, on to the outside world, I'm superwoman. I'm superhuman. I've
Mm-hmm.
just got promoted to a new job, so I'm taking on new stuff because they're recognizing that I'm great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but inside, I'm fighting every single day. I've got dealing with my mom and the sadness of that. I'm being a mummy and doing this, taking care of your little boy, um, and keeping my head above water. You said the word surviving.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this, kind of people now would say, well, I'll buy a new car. I'm going to reinforce the perception that I'm doing amazing stuff.
Yeah.
But more than that, did you think about quitting the job?
It was funny. I couldn't quit because I was the breadwinner, right? I quit. We have no money. I have a son. I have a mum. Well, there was no option. So, and in a way, that's beautiful sometimes. When you know there is no option, you have to find a way. You have to find a way.
Mm.
And the car for me was an irrelevance. And I think that's the thing about intentionality and leading with intention. We want everything too quickly. I love the Dopamine Nation. The book about really understanding what dopamine does to us. We're living in a world at the moment that we're just looking for continuous dopamine hits. And I've always I've always been lucky enough to realize the good things we wait for. I've never bought anything on credit. I've always earned the money, then spent the money. And I don't know where that comes from. Maybe from a background of being brought up with not having an awful lot. Um,
I think it's a Helens
yeah,
thing, Paula, because I'm exactly the same. Maybe
yeah.
it's something about that town.
St. Helens,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, I mean, most of our you will resonate. I remember you talking about sitting in the Jared pub, and I know that
Yeah.
pub well. We didn't have a lot. I mean, we had more than some, but I think that grit element teaches you a lot. Hey,
Well, I wrote that word down earlier when you went down the list of things and circled it since, because I think it's such a valuable asset in life,
Hmm.
wherever you want to go. And have you read the book, Angela Duckworth's book about grit?
Yes, yeah, a long time ago, but I have, and it really resonated with me.
Yeah, and what I love about it was the challenge of how do I teach people grit,
Hmm.
and he gives some really great tips. And the thing that I remember is it's got to be based around a milestone. It's
Hmm.
okay to quit, but it's not okay to quit whenever you like. You
Hmm.
quit at a milestone. And
Hmm.
so she says things like, you're going to learn a musical instrument, so you've got an exam that you need to pass or that you're working towards. After
Hmm.
that exam, you can quit, or after you
Hmm.
pass that exam, you can quit if you don't enjoy it. And David Goggins is a guy that I've read a lot about over the years, and he's an outdoorsman and an ultra runner. And he says, never quit when you're outside. It's easy to quit when you're cold and wet.
Hmm.
When you're dry and warm, then you can make a decision to quit. But you then it's not just your emotions that are saying this is too much. It's a logical.
Hmm.
I've decided to quit because I'm no longer enjoying it, and
Hmm.
those are important. And I think that's what we miss a lot when I talk about people dealing with difficult customers, difficult colleagues, difficult managers. I think the thing that I take for granted is grit, because
Mm.
you cannot come through anything that is difficult without it.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. And you have to be prepared that there is potentially in that relationship that there's a rocky road to get to a good place, but you've got to be prepared for that. I agree, absolutely agree with you.
Perhaps that's I don't know if it's in one of the other five C's that you were talking about earlier on, and whether it fits in there. I do think it's an overlooked element that we people who I talk about who have achieved things, they've come through difficult moments. It's all because of grit, because it's too easy to give up. And I had a metaphor that I used in life, which is around stepping to the left, that
Okay.
we're following our life's path. We're on a
Yeah.
journey through life.
Yeah.
And occasionally we come across a boulder in the
Yeah.
road. What do we do with that boulder? We can step to the left and
Hmm.
just go past it and just
Hmm.
avoid it,
Hmm.
and then keep going. And then you come across another one. And what do? Do you step to the left? And if you keep stepping to the left, what you find is that you're getting further and further from the path that you started out on.
Yes.
That might be okay. There
Yeah.
might be impenetrable barriers that are just too much for you to overcome. But I think often we find ourselves on this journey through life, and that we're so far away from where we want to be. We don't know why, and it's because we've taken the easy option each time.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes you've got to stand in front of that boulder and that barrier and climb over it, or break it down, or do something that means that it doesn't dominate you, you dominate it, and you can then keep going on that path. And
I
that's the
love that.
role of grit.
Yeah.
That's the role of grit for me. And it combines perfectly with that clarity, right? Where do you want to go? How important is it that you overcome this moment right now
Yeah.
versus something else? And I wonder if in those moments, I mean, I wrote down responsibility, right? You said, I was the breadwinner. I couldn't quit, Chris. I was the breadwinner. I wrote responsibility, but now I'm thinking actually, there's more to it than that. There was a pride and an identity,
Yeah.
because you could have found another job if you'd
Yes.
really wanted to, right? You could have
Yes.
found a way to take care of people. But it was more than that. It was something, a vision, a passion, a pride that you had in the way that you were taking care of your family that drove you to say, this one is not something I'm going to step around. This one I'm going to smash through.
I love that. I love that analogy, and what a lovely just to sit back and listen to you describe that. You're right. I mean, for me, I really do love that analogy you just shared. I think for me, there was no way I was going to fail. And for me, and it's not about win or lose. It's about I just believe in life. we all have the ability to continuously grow. And I knew that within me there was growth. And by stepping to the left, I was not going to face the challenge of the growth. And that for me is, we've got one life. So lean into it, look at it, and grow, and for me, there's no other option. So I love that analogy. What a great, I'll steal that. I'm going to steal that. Can I?
Of course you can. Of course you can. So what was the masters? I'm very curious now. What masters did you study?
Yeah, I did a master's at Oxford, SAIAD, and Paris HSA, and it was called Consulting and Leading in Change, and fabulous masters. And it's really funny. I went on it to think that I was, I learned a lot of models and theories and books, but as we all learn when we go on these journeys, particularly in coaching, the biggest journey, particularly in Paris, because it's a little bit more out there and creative, it was just about learning about self. And it took me on this 18-month journey of self-realization, basically. It was the best thing I ever did.
So tell us, what are the other C's? So we have clarity is a big
Yeah.
part of who you are.
Yeah.
What else do you have?
So clarity, God, you can talk about clarity forever, but once we're clear in who we are, clear on where we're going, clear on, who we, the people around us. The next one is courage, which is a little bit speaks to the grit. It's about not stepping to the side. It's about pushing through. And realizing that courage is, once you've got clarity, courage becomes easy because you know where you're going, and you don't step aside anymore. So courage, huge. And I think, again, in coaching, and in workshops, sometimes people have lost their courage. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to say what needs to be said. So I think it's an important C. Then we move to congruence, walking our talk, knowing who we are, having strong roots and being that human every day for our kids, for our family, for our teams. And then we move from congruence, we move to connection, which is a bit about how do we connect with ourselves? How do we connect and adapt to each other? I think it's a powerful C that some people are good at and some people are less good at. And then the final two C's, coherence was my master's, basically. My whole dissertation was on energy and sustainability, being mentally and emotionally flexible and being well. And then the final C is compassion, compassion for the world, compassion for each other, but equally compassion for self. They are my C's.
No, they're brilliant, and I think I can see how you can use them really directly with clients who are looking for the direction to see where they're going. I also can understand why you spend a lot of time on clarity, because I think that's, as you describe, right, that's the starting point and the end point, and everything else is wrapped around that to help you get to where you want to be. I want to talk a bit about courage for a second, because I think there's lots of things written about courage, and we have the heroes that we see in the world who we believe are really courageous. And when we ask people, they kind of say, I didn't have a choice. It was just the way that it had to be.
Yeah.
And there's a book that I read a few years ago about a British soldier who was horribly wounded in Afghanistan. He lost both of his legs, and it is his story of recovery and getting to where he wanted to get to. And people add courage to that. And he says, no, because what option did I have? It's just the way that I needed to live my life. And I think that when we say to people to be courageous, it's a difficult thing to ask people to do something that they're afraid of, to do something that feels really stressful.
Yes.
How do you support people in that?
Yeah, it's again a great question. I talk a lot about the COI, the cost of inactivity, and if someone is really clear on something, whether it be work or life, home, uh, my next question always is, well, what is the cost of that not happening? And I think if we can get to a pain component of, my God, I have to do this. If I live my life and look back and I don't do this, I am going to regret. Then for me, that enables the courage to be something that we don't need to be frightened of. Now, courage doesn't mean, we do it and we don't fear. It means we fear and we do it anyway. And I love those moments. If we can have that dance together with a person or a team or an organization, that we're going to do it. We don't want to do it, but we're going to do it, and we're going to try and feel excited and positive about it as much as we can. But oh my God, when we've done it and we realize that was magnificent and I feel great and it wasn't as bad as I thought, that then becomes the impetus for the courage to grow. But I don't think we should ever underestimate. It's hard, and for some people, for a whole array of backstory, it can be something you can work with someone on courage for 6-8 months, until they finally make that step. So I don't think we should we never hold that word lightly, because it's hard. But for me, what is the cost of not doing it? And I think if
Yeah.
we can understand that, then all of a sudden, we've got no. It's the same analogy of the question of, there's a burning tower, and you can go into that burning tower, and I'll give you $10, and how much is it going to cost you to go into that burning tower? And everyone in the audience will put their hands up for certain amounts of money. But then you say, all right, look at the burning tower. Your child is in the window. How much do you need? And you're going to run. Yeah. And that for me is, if we spend some time at the cost of inactivity, I think courage becomes a lower barrier, a lower threshold.
That's very true. It's the courage is always the fear of what's going to go wrong. You talked about speaking up earlier on as an example of courage. And the reason we don't speak up is because of the consequences of speaking up, the risk of losing my job, losing my credibility, being laughed at by
Yeah.
other people. And that's the barrier. That's the thing that's in the way. That's why I can't speak up. But then if the price of not speaking up is greater on
Yes.
your soul, on your happiness, peace of mind, other people who are perhaps victims because you're not speaking up on fairness or injustice, then that cost can be worth taking, that risk, inverted commas. Say, yes, it's time for me to speak up. And I think that's what we miss, don't we? We miss the balance of the two. And I teach people in commercial discussions the balance between results and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And often we have organizational results in our
Mm-hmm.
mind, goals that are given to us by our business.
Mm-hmm.
The relationships that we are managing, they're our people, whether they're our customers, our team members, it doesn't matter, but they're ours. And so very often we're prepared to compromise other people's results for our relationships because it's
Yes.
easier. It's like,
Yes.
it's nicer.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying here is what are you measuring? What does success look like for you? And
Yeah.
it's all very well to say, well, working this way isn't going to deliver the results that our organization wants. But do you know what? Let's not worry about it because the risk of it might damage my reputation, my relationship. What you're saying is that if everyone does that, then suddenly we're all in trouble. And balancing those two things and seeing what the personal cost might be takes you in a different direction, might give you the impetus to change.
Completely. And I think it links to another point that you asked, what are the challenges that people I work with every day are facing, is pause. Because people often are not making time, because the world is so busy, of course, but time to allow themselves time to process the cost. And I think once we've given ourselves the space to really work something through, we might possibly get to the place of, I don't want to do this, but you know what? I have to do it. But if we're not allowing ourselves the space to think this stuff through, we just keep being silent or keep not saying what needs to be said, or and yeah, at a detriment that is far greater for ourselves in the long run.
It's been a very interesting conversation, Paul, and I'm conscious again, time passes so quickly when I get involved in these discussions, and I love it. Just reflecting on the things we've talked about, what would your advice be for people who are struggling at the moment? They're finding themselves in a difficult place. It's the end of the year. They're reviewing their year, thinking about the next year, and maybe shaking their heads thinking, I don't know if I can do this again, given the pressure that we're all under. What's your advice to people like that?
I would offer everybody to find some peace over the next few weeks, as much as one can, and that is easier for some than others. You know, even if we're a young mum and we've got 3 kids and a family coming and 12 turkeys to cook, hey, it's hard, right? But I would encourage everybody, whether that means you have to just empower someone else to take over for a few hours, find some peace and a place to just go for a lovely long walk or a lovely long swim, or sit in a coffee shop with a notebook and a pen, and just allow your brain to unfold and to think, you know, what gives me joy? What do I want? When I'm looking back in 10, 20, 30 years, what would I regret if I don't do? That for me is what I would offer everyone this Christmas break is find that pause. And anybody who tells me I have no time to find pause, I will challenge and I will say, think about what it is you need to put in place to enable your pause to happen. And that would be my Christmas words for everyone.
I think that's beautiful, Paul. And I'd add to it that you talked earlier on about clarity and clarity of where you're going. And I think I'm going to add to it that there's a clarity of what's not important, what doesn't matter. I don't like turkey. I'm throwing it out there. I haven't eaten turkey for so many years at Christmas time because I just think it's dry and flavorless. So I don't understand the rush around to buy turkey just because we have to have turkey. We eat a meal as a family because we want to have a family meal on Christmas Day that we want to enjoy.
Yes.
And to me, there's an example, like a silly example of making choices that mean like, oh, cooking a turkey is a nightmare. I don't know how to do it. It takes forever. I'm worried about how it's going to turn out. So do you know what? Cook something else. Who cares? Yeah,
exactly. I agree with you. Christmas is just a time to be. And however we need to do that, let's find those moments to be. No, I love that. I don't really like turkey either, Chris.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paula. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. I hope you took away some useful insights. Join us again next time when we unpick the behaviours of more difficult people. Until then, take care and see you soon.